everyone, my name is Rachel. Welcome back to my channel. Today I am bringing you guys a video where I talk about the books that made me truly fall in love with the adult romance genre. Now, I have done a video kind of similar to this in the past. I'll link it up in the cards above. It's called My Romance Reading Journey or something like that. And that kind of dives more into the kinds of romance-ish books that I was reading when I was younger, going into adulthood and up into today. I think I made that video back in like early 2021, but this video is focusing more on particular books that made me fall in love with certain subgenres or certain romance tropes, different things like that. I just thought that this would be a fun topic to talk about. And I was actually inspired to make this video because Lisa from Remarkably Lisa made a video about this same topic. I have not watched it yet, but I'm sure it's fantastic because everything that Lisa makes is fantastic. So the first book that I want to talk about is The Hating Game by Sally Thorne. So I read this back in the fall of 2018, which was when I started getting back into reading for fun, and that's also when I started my Goodreads account, so I really started keeping track of what I was reading, because before late 2018 I was in college and grad school. I was not reading for fun at all, really. I can vaguely remember reading a couple of books in undergrad for fun, but like grad school, there was just a lot going on for me in grad school, so I was not reading for fun by any means. I'm not going to go too deeply into the plots of any of these books, but this is an office romance. It's also an enemies to lovers romance. This is also a pretty classic rom-com in my opinion, and I was just like truly blown away by this book because this was the first adult romance book that I had read in a long time, and I just adored it. It's still a romance novel that I would recommend if you're just getting into adult romance, also because I do remember it being like lower heat. Like there are some steamy scenes in this, but nothing too graphic from what I can remember. And it's just funny because, like I said, I read it way back in 2018 and there are still scenes that I can vividly remember in my mind, like the paintball scene and the caretaking scene. Like it's crazy how this book has stood the test of time, like in my memory. So next up, we are going to go into how I fell in love with historical romance. So I first started reading historical romance because I got a NetGalley account. If you don't know what NetGalley is, it is a website that anyone can sign up for, and you request ARCs or advanced reader copies, their ebook versions of these books before they're published. So basically the idea behind NetGalley is that when you receive an ebook ARC, you are also agreeing to review that ARC before the book comes out. And so I started reading really random historical romances off of there, like really random like indie authors that I honestly can't even remember the names of these authors anymore. But those books were just fine. Like I was giving them like 3.5 stars, but I could totally see the appeal of historical romances. And then I read The Duchess Deal by Tessa Dare. I want to say like late 2019 was when I read this for the first time. And oh my God, I was so blown away because this book just has like everything that I could ever want in a romance novel. If you don't know what this is about, it's a marriage of convenience. It also has Beauty and the Beast vibes. We have Ash, our hero, who is a scarred hero. This is a book I know I'll never forget about. I've read it twice at this point, which is really saying something because I don't reread books all that often. So this was the first historical romance that I had given 5 stars and that I was truly blown away by. And so from then on, I feel like I just dove headfirst into the historical romance subgenre and I have not looked back since. So for that reason alone, I will always be grateful to Tessa Dare and I will always be grateful that this book exists. Another notable book for me has to be The Kiss Quotient by Helen Hoang. If you don't know, this is a gender-bent Pretty Woman sort of retelling. We have Stella, our heroine. She has autism spectrum disorder. What is truly amazing about this book is that it really opened my eyes about representation in romance novels. That's something that I really wasn't thinking about before I read this. I think I read this in like mid 2019 or something like that. And this is also one of the books that kind of opened my eyes to the idea that I myself may have autism spectrum disorder. I have not gotten a formal diagnosis or anything like that by any means, but I have kind of done my own research and my own soul searching, and it is something that just really makes sense for me. And this is one of the first books that I read that truly opened my eyes to that idea. And so for that alone, I will always be grateful to this book. I relate to Stella so much in so many ways, and I love Michael, our hero. Like this, it's incredible, and it is still to this day one of my favorite romance novels of all time. Next up we have Marriage for One by Ella Mays. This is the first extreme slow burn romance that I'd ever read. This book is 500 pages. I've actually read it twice. And this is just an awesome grumpy sunshine marriage of convenience romance. It's so beautiful, so intimate. And so I actually read this before checking out Mariana Zapata, but this was the book that made me realize that I might really love books like this and books by Mariana Zapata. So yeah, this is it's just a wonderful story, means so much to me. Like I said, the fact that I've read it twice should really tell you something. Next up we have the Bromance Book Club. Now I have read and loved most of this series. I did not love the most recent book, but the first 3 books of this series, man, they just really worked for me. This first book in particular I think is still my favorite, and that is because this is the very first marriage in trouble romance that I had ever read, and oh my god, that's like my favorite trope now. I adore marriage in trouble romances, and this one is just like everything to me because it's about Gavin, our hero, and him and his friends form this book club where they read romances to better understand their partners. And so throughout this book we see excerpts of this historical romance that's also a marriage in trouble story, and it's just really interesting to see how Gavin applies like reading that book to his real life with his wife Thea. And this is just a beautiful story. Marriage in trouble stories will always have a special place in my heart. Next up we have The Unhoneymooners by Christina Lauren. This was my very first book that I read by this author duo, and this is also one of the first true rom-coms that I read. I think I read this back in like maybe early 2019, something like that. This is also an enemies or hate to love romantic comedy. It's about Olive and Ethan. They hate each other, but they end up having to go on Olive's sister's honeymoon because Olive's sister and her new husband get really sick. Like everybody gets really sick at their wedding reception except for Olive and Ethan because they're the only ones that don't eat the shrimp at the reception. So yeah, they go to Hawaii together, and this is such a fun book. I need to reread this. I would also highly recommend this if you prefer your romances to be lower heat, meaning that this one is fade to black. Basically that means that sex is implied but you don't actually see it happen on the page, and yeah, this is just fantastic. So we have just a couple books left. Next one I had to mention is Archer's Voice by Mia Sheridan. This was the first book that I read by this author, and this one blew me away because it's a small town romance but also an epic romance. And in my mind, when I think of epic romances, I think of like fantasy romance or science fiction, just something that's literally out of this world. But this book proved to me that epic romances can exist in a small town or a contemporary setting. Just to tell you a little bit about what's going on though, this one's about Archer, who is mute actually because of an accident he got in as a child. So he literally couldn't speak if he wanted to. And then our heroine Bree, who moves to the small town that Archer lives in, and it's amazing. There's also some romantic suspense elements to this as well. It's absolutely fantastic. I have talked about this book so much on my channel. I featured it in my top 10 favorite contemporary romances that I read in 2021 if you are curious. And then last but certainly not least, I had to bring up Wolf Gone Wild by Juliet Cross. This is book 1 in her Stay a Spell series. The 3 books that are currently out in this series are truly the best paranormal romances that I have ever read. I am not exaggerating when I say that. This series definitely raised my expectations in terms of what I want from paranormal romances, because this series combines a small town romance feel with paranormal creatures, and these books are just like the perfect amount of sexy and swoony. And so when you combine all of those things into one book, like, that's incredible. I'm absolutely obsessed. And also these books take place in New Orleans, which is where I'm from, and I live in the area. And so it's just really cool to read about this awesome paranormal world that Juliet Cross has created in a city like New Orleans, because because New Orleans is literally like the perfect place to center a paranormal romance series. So yeah, this totally changed the game in terms of how I view paranormal romances. Just so amazing. So that is going to be it for the books that made me fall in love with the romance genre, or with different aspects of the romance genre, I guess I would say. I would love it if you would leave a comment down below if you have any books that pop into your mind in terms of books that made you fall in love with this genre. And I would also love it if you would leave a like and subscribe, and I thank you so much in advance if you do, and I will see you guys in the next video. Bye!